Hello everyone, Mahojo here. As you may have heard, the US has now enacted a coup in the country of Venezuela. There's a lot flying around on the news right now in terms of, sorry to use this term, but the mainstream media, it's all very, very surface level. Not many answers being given, not many questions being asked, to be honest. Not much investigative journalism being done at all, um, or even not investigative. Basic academia or expertise being applied to answer or explore any real questions. A couple of big questions that people may be feeling about this. Um, why? Firstly, big question, why? There are explanations given by the US government publicly. There are nominal um, reasons given as to why they may be an enemy of Venezuela. The whole narco terrorism stuff. Um, that probably seems a bit flimsy to a lot of people, even if you don't know much about the situation. People are probably like, okay, but is that it? Like, is that real? Like, and to what extent is it real? Like, I'm sure Venezuela does traffic drugs, and yes, you would be right, Venezuela does traffic a lot of drugs, but is that like the reason? Is that both the long term and the imminent reason as to why they actually took military action and have kidnapped the president of the country? Is that why? Well, no. And, beyond general concerns of geopolitical staging and relationships with Russia, China, and Iran um, in the two continents of America, these narratives that are just being laundered and just for free, given airtime and given credibility by a lot of news places, not much is being investigated as to why. But as you may have thought, especially if you're looking for some 15 subscriber channel, if you're looking for a bit more on this, no, that's obviously not why. The reason why this has happened, with 90+% certainty, is the attempt to take oil off market, not to steal the oil. You may have seen that in other places where, oh, America, like, the meme, the sort of stereotype about American military intervention is they want the oil. It's sort of the opposite of that nowadays. A lot of things are going to be done which are more and more desperate, more and more intense by the US government to try and reduce the global oil supply. Let me give you some background. So, in the 90s and 2000s, the US was the world's biggest oil importer. They've been a very big oil producer for a long time. America never stopped being a big energy producer. But there was sort of a slowing compared to the level of economic activity, the level of energy, the level of industry, and there was a bit of a gap between demand and domestic supply. For quite a few years, America was the world's biggest oil importer. Now they are certainly not, and they are the world's biggest oil exporter. The shale revolution, as they call it, and just in general, a reaffirmation of investment in domestic oil has flipped it. The incentives now are flipped. You may have, heard about America went into Iraq for the oil. They're always going after these places in the Middle East so they can take the oil. That's not, it's sort of the opposite now. America has more than enough oil. They're approaching, I believe, 14 million barrels a day. More than Saudi Arabia. For a few years, they've been above Saudi Arabia in oil production. Saudi Arabia is just peaking over 10 million. I have a graph here that I'm looking at for reference. Maybe I'll splice it in, maybe I won't. It depends how much time I have. But yeah, I'm looking at a graph here from Our World in Data, which is an international source. It's not really a news source, it's just a statistical source that does a pretty good job of collating reliable data and displaying it publicly. Our World in Data. And I'll link a graph that shows that since 2017 is when America took off again, and really it's exploded in the last 8 years because of shale, which is like a form of gas. Instead of drilling regular, good old black liquid oil from wells in the ground, shale is done mostly overseas, and it's a gas. It's a new type of technology that has been around for a while, but improvements in the high level technology needed to extract shale have really come about in the 2010s, and America is one of the only countries that can, to any appreciable extent, do a lot of shale drilling, and they have been harvesting that. They have been taking advantage of that so much. And from 2017, I'll show you it. You can just see it explode. Well, not even from 2017. From 2009, their production just explodes. It's not just about shale. It's about a lot of things. It's about improvements in technology, but it's gone up incredibly fast since 2009, and then about midway in that explosion, 2017, they beat Saudi Arabia in oil production. But for a while, you'll be able to see that in between 1991 and 2017, Saudi Arabia produced significantly more oil. So in that period, where not only are they not the biggest producer in the world, but there's also a gap between their demand and what they produce. And they're certainly not exporting much. America was not known as an oil or hydrocarbon exporter literally until like 10-15 years ago. So this is changing. The incentive has flipped. But the problem now is that, so obviously because America is not a slave country, they might turn into one, you don't know, but as for now, globally speaking, America's wages, quality of life, working rights in the work environment are better than Saudi Arabia. Definitely, the use of slaves in Saudi Arabia is massive. In Russia, just for general economic reasons, the Russian quality of life, the Russian GDP per capita, the level of inflation, the level of wages, and even union strength. America is not known for its unions, but even the union situation in Russia is a lot worse. And a lot of these Middle Eastern countries, oil can be produced a lot cheaper. Saudi Arabia, their price per barrel of oil for production is thought to be as low as $10, $10 per barrel, 10 to 15. 10 to 15 is the normal range. It's kind of hard to tell. The price of production for a regular US barrel of oil, about $64. 64 compared to 10 or 15. Massive difference. Shale, obviously, some of this is sort of like trade secrets. A lot of this is emerging technology. A lot of this technology is finding its feet, so it's hard to cost, because if there's like influx of investment in new drills and things and new platforms offshore, it might be hard to get a stable year by year, month by month, barrel by barrel running cost. So some of these figures are still adjusting, but we know at least that this offshore fracking and a lot of this inshore fracking as well is significantly more expensive than regular oil drilling. Some of this more expensive, like this really good technology that will go into the ocean tens or hundreds of miles offshore and on a large scale frack lots and lots of gas and shale. A lot of that, you're talking maybe $90 a barrel. So the general range of American production cost, anywhere from like 60 up until maybe like $100 a barrel. Saudi Arabia, 10-15. So what do you do? So you've got your domestic industry, which you can take care of, because even if they do it so cheaply, they don't have any pipelines going across the ocean they're not going. It's really inefficient to try and ship it to you. No, and just for national security reasons, in recent, well, say years, but decades, again, 10, 15, 20 years, they've been incentivizing domestic production and domestic sale. So they can look after, and for a while now, 10, 15 years, have been able to look after domestic industry in America. So there isn't a price war there, but obviously, in a roundabout way, you are still sensitive to those global oil markets if you want to export anything. And to a certain extent, if you want to stop internal private companies not doing what you want and going elsewhere and trying to buy oil from other countries, obviously, you cannot let global oil prices get too low, because then you're unprofitable. And there's this almost secret, like, situation unfolding because it doesn't want to get covered so openly in mainstream media, on ITV News or whatever, because it's very, like, nakedly greed. Like, it's there's no sort of artifice. There's not like a couple layers of nobility that can be put on top of it. It's just very, looking at the numbers very concretely because of greed. This thing is, if you look at the Brent crude oil price, which is the main and most well-known benchmark they use for American oil prices, that oil price, for them, it needs to stay above 64. If their trading price is below $64 a barrel, it's unprofitable. If it's above, it's profitable. So if you look at this stat over time, and I've got this up just on my screen here, again, might put it on the screen or something, things tend to happen related to oil recently whenever this figure approaches 64. So the strikes on Iran, which happened technically last year, 2025, the strikes on Iranian suspected nuclear facilities and a couple other facilities, they happened just as the Brent crude oil price was nearing 64. It's not a massive spike, but firstly, instability in general, but also instability for an oil producing nation. What that's going to do, going to get people nervous. So if people don't want to be missing out, and people don't have as much trust in the continuous supply of oil, people need to stock up. People need to keep oil. They want to increase their storage. They'll start planning more to have more storage. They're going to feel a little bit more hesitant about just selling off any oil stocks, oil futures, or physical oil itself. So that means the price will go up. And if you look at, when were those strikes? Hold on, sorry about this. Let me just quickly look up when were those Iranian strikes. US strikes on Iran. Nuclear facilities. Seems to be 21st and 22nd of June 2025. So let's have a look at that. So they were building up to those strikes. The price went up because of trepidation, and then it looks like straight afterwards, as soon as those strikes happened, because there was more of an influx of production to satisfy this demand. Sometimes these things can be weird. It went slightly down very quickly, and then over a slightly longer period of time, stabilized. So it was going down, 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 down. Then in the week or two running up to it, there's a bit of a rush before it's known to have happened, and then when the strikes happen, there's potential of anything. As far as they know, in the days coming, maybe they struck Iranian oil. You don't know. And now that the suppliers have factored that in, they know it's happened, the pipes are turned, the taps are turned on more, and they're preparing maybe to step in. They're preparing to step in and replace Iranian supply. So in a couple of days, it goes quickly down again. But even though you'd think that's bad, over that medium-term period, because of what I've previously described, it stays stabilized. If you look throughout the latter half of 2025, 66, 67, 68, hovering up to 70, down 65 in around September, 66, 67, October, 65, all the way down to 61 in the mid-October of last year, 64, 65, 62. Oh, and towards the end of last year, you get below 60. That's a big red line. 61, 60, 58. So you're just pipping over into 59, 58 the end of last year. Now it's unprofitable. Something else needs to be done. And I have very little doubt that in the months to come, you will see a stabilization of the Brent crude oil price at a profitable level for the US. Because that's what this is all about. It's flipped. It's not about getting the oil, it's about restricting non-US supplies of oil. And they are pressing the accelerator because there's nothing they can do if they don't do this. There's no other way to do this. They are impassably, unbelievably more expensive than some other global options. But what does the US have? Has the most powerful military in the world. You will continue to see in this year and coming years, until there's some sort of fundamental change, more and more desperate actions against more and more countries to stop them from producing their own oil. And the US will then step in along with Saudi Arabia and hoover up all of that. It'll get more and more monopolized. Right now it seems like in the coming year or two, the US and Saudi Arabia are just going to go toe to toe, and they are both going to be hoovering up oil production throughout the whole world and hydrocarbon production. Russia's going offline because of Ukrainian strikes on their oil facilities. The US is, I don't know, they're neutral about that. They don't mind Russian oil going offline, but for different reasons. There may be a bit of an alliance forming there, or at least a little bit of a rapport between the US government in its current state and the Russian military. To give you some figures here. Yeah, Saudi Arabia crude in October 2025 was just above 10 million. US was just below 14 million. So Saudi, presumably, is going to just keep upping their production. They have got so much more to go. So many more facilities. Saudi is unbelievable. It's like, I don't know if you've ever seen those videos. You can use like a hand tool or just like a spade. Certain points, if you go into the desert, are completely untapped. Get a spade, you dig down 6 inches, maybe 2 feet. You dig down, and there's just oil there at the surface. Basically, there's just oil there. It's unbelievable. Eventually, you might see a war between the US and Saudi Arabia. Maybe this decade. But for now, we're just going to keep seeing things like this. You know, Venezuela, maybe Guyana. Guyana is a neighbouring country in South America to Venezuela. Very small GDP, but literally, either last year or 2024, they discovered massive offshore oil and gas in their international, not their international waters, but in their territorial waters. But it's a small country with only a few million people in it, right next to Venezuela. You're going to see negotiations, threats, more actions, more coups, more missile strikes, in an attempt to scare a lot of smaller producers. Think of places like the Philippines, Vietnam, Argentina, a lot of these places are sort of middle producing countries. They'll produce between a couple thousand and maybe 500,000, 600,000 barrels a day. Venezuela, for example, is 1 million. Again, the US is 14 million. But a lot of these middle countries that aren't really global players, they're not big regional or big global powers. They're countries that are small enough and connected enough to the US. Vietnam is very connected to the US. They're in the right position to basically be bullied by the US. You'll see at first it'll be talking, it'll be harsh negotiations, and then maybe you'll get some sort of economic consequence or more military consequence. You'll keep seeing things like this in the future because this background battle is going on. That's going on is this seemingly pretty unsustainable. I don't just mean environmentally, but seemingly pretty unsustainable and increasingly desperate battle by the US to stay competitive in hydrocarbons, despite the fact they're becoming the most expensive oil producer, basically. Venezuela, maybe right now because their oil sucks, and they're not very good at it. But still, a lot of this new shale shit more expensive to produce than Venezuela. But another consideration, I'll save that for next time. But that's the why. That's one big question. The why. There is this, not underground, that makes it sound all like not obvious, but this is just all public information, but it's just not being delivered. I'm just trying to deliver this sort of, this reality and this narrative that there is this bubbling background battle that the US is going on to try and remain competitive. That explains a lot of the stuff going on recently. So yeah, if you're wondering what the hell is going on, why is this all the case? That's why, basically. It's for the oil, but it's not because they want it. It's because they don't want it there. They don't want anyone to have it. But yeah, that's why. I'll expand a bit more into the effects, maybe. The good, the bad, and the ugly. But thanks for watching this one. Try and have a good day. Thank you.